event. Next Generation is hosting this event, and a question that we often get is, aid agencies are being blocked, and now UNICEF is still in the region. What else can be done, assuming aid is off the table? What did the group in this room walk away from this evening doing? What action can they take?
I mean, it's a difficult one. Normally we would say, find a partner organisation locally, work with them. But some of the most shocking interviews I had were with local human rights organisations, local NGOs. The population that are there at the moment, they're very frustrated. Some of them even worry about being prosecuted because they are basically running detention camps. So they're frustrated, and they say that they can't talk about it because of this chilling effect. If they say anything, then they're out. And it's not just out of Situate, they'll be kicked out of the entire country. So the number of people that will suffer as a result of that is what they have to keep in mind. So it's difficult to get involved doing something internally, and I think I would just follow what Zarni said, and I think we need to put pressure on from the outside. We have to rethink the sanctions. Did we rush that? Were we too hard, too rash in removing sanctions from Burma? We need to recognise the involvement of the Union government, and to do that, we can do that politically in the UK and other places by calling on the government to step up. But it's actually a very difficult one. There needs to be some level of advocacy from the humanitarians on the ground, but they say they're feeding it up, but it's just not coming out the top where it's supposed to. The UN are quite quiet about it.
Yeah, I think organizations like UNICEF, for example, they can't be political, right? So if they speak out, it's very difficult for them to stay in the country. So it's that question of, do we speak out for what's happening and lose access to these people who obviously need our help? Or do we keep quiet and keep helping the people we can and cooperate with the government?
That's the trap. But yeah. Where do you stop? I mean, NGOs told me that they would stop if people were forced into camps, if they didn't voluntarily move into camps. There was a camp in Pakto where the people were marched there at gunpoint. So the NGOs involved just said, well, we're going to have to move our red line back. So it's a very difficult one. But I think just getting the word out there, if people understood what was going on there, I think it would be over tomorrow, really. We just need to get the word out.
I want to give other people the opportunity.
One of the names omitted from tonight is Aung San Suu Kyi. Why do you think she's not speaking out about, I don't know that much about it, why do you think she's not speaking out about this issue?
Can we take a few more questions and do the round?
All right, so maybe this side here.
Thank you again. I didn't know much about Burma except the name Aung San Suu Kyi until recently when I learnt about the persecution of the Chin people in Chin State. So growing a picture of Myanmar as a place of persecution, to say the least. What is your opinion on normal people like myself? Should we be visiting Burma? Is this a place that needs to be open to the international community, or is it actually a place where, for want of a better word, severe sanctions are put on this country until something changes?
Thank you. I would like to ask, how do you think some recent movements from Burmese government, for example, like the Navy rescued some refugee boats recently, is this a positive signal from the government that they're willing to cooperate with Rohingya or other communities now to solve the problem? And the second question I would like to ask, because you mentioned Soros and you mentioned the international communities, but I would like to ask, how do you look at the US role in particular in the Rohingya problem? Because like I've heard many people say that the US look at Burma as a very strategic position with border China and India and has a lot of natural resource. So instead of like worrying about human rights issue, it is correct that the US and other US business people like Soros, they tend to be more interested in Burma in terms of natural resource and business rather than human rights issues. It is clear. Thank you.
Can I respond to? On the question of Aung San Suu Kyi, I have first-hand experience. When she first came to UK after long years of imprisonment back in June of 2012.
I'm not telling people who she is for those who are new to the subject.
Aung San Suu Kyi, she's considered Asian Nelson Mandela of Burma, spent a total of about 15 or 18 years under house arrest. Her husband died of lung cancer, I believe, while she was under house arrest. And, she was given the choice of staying under house arrest or leaving the country so that she could be with her husband in his deathbed. She chose to stay under house arrest, and that the husband died without saying goodbye. At any rate, she is the most popular opposition leader. The constitution has been written in such a way that she could never hold the highest office because she's got two sons who are British citizens. So the constitution states that anyone who has close family relations or relatives who enjoy the citizenship rights and privileges of other countries cannot be president. And so she will never be president as long as this constitution is in place. But that said, she is surrounded by people who are anti-Rohingya racists, Rakhines and Buddhists, as well as ex-military, high-ranking military officers who were involved in early anti-Rohingya military campaigns in the 1950s. And her own co-founder of the National League for Democracy, which is the party's name, is anti-Rohingya. And also, she is, I will say this as a Buddhist chauvinist. She wears her Buddhism on her sleeve as a national ideology. She condones nationalism, considers this as something positive if it can be controlled. But you see, by definition, nationalism cannot be controlled. It's a human, passion, conditioned response to certain things, and she plays fire. She plays with fire. Burmese Buddhist, nationalism. And then thirdly, she believes that saying anything on the Rohingya will bring no political good to her in terms of her election calculations. And fourthly, I think she has not done her homework. She herself thinks, judging by all the sound bites as well as her pronouncements that she's made, she still thinks Rohingya is an illegal migration issue. She talks about the corruption of immigration officials along the Western Burmese border, although there's only out-migration of Rohingyas and Muslims from the Rakhine State, not in-migration from Bangladesh side. And so, given these a number of factors, she refuses to comment on it. When she arrived in London, the day before she arrived, the Foreign Office informed the LSE panel chair that she would be in quote-unquote listening mode especially on Rohingya issue. In other words, she did not want to address the issue. This has been going on for about 3 years. There are editorials after editorials from the Times of London to Washington Post to New York Times, essentially criticizing her for staying silent in the case where the issue is so black and white. And most recently, His Holiness Dalai Lama came out openly in the Australian newspaper criticizing her. He said he appealed to her personally to say something, do something. She refuses to say something, on grounds that the issues are too complex. And on the question of whether you should visit or not, I think you should visit. And it's there are so many intelligent and smart ways to travel, to see the situation, and to talk to the people on the ground. And I'm not in favor of isolating the country because that's not going to benefit anybody, neither the outside world nor the people in the country. And I was a part of the campaign to isolate and boycott the country for the longest time, and it has not worked. And so I'm in favor of ordinary citizens like yourself going there, and then maybe trying to get into the Rakhine State and see the situation on the ground for yourself. And when you come back, pen an article or talk to the media, or if you see something inaccurate in the media, either broadcast or printed, you pen a letter to the editor and you say I've been to Burma, this is what I learned, and your editorial is incorrect. And finally, on the U.S. role in Burma, I think the United States involvement in Burma has been a mixed blessing. On the one hand, we have a Samantha Power as a U.S. Representative to the United Nations. She made her name writing a book about genocide. She won the Pulitzer Prize. She is now the U.S. ambassador. And she is a very good ally for the Rohingyas. She's pushing the issue from inside. But on the other hand, the American policy is driven by structural interests of the Pentagon and corporations. And so there is a tug of war going on within the United States foreign policy circles. And so, but so far, the Americans, particularly on the Rohingyas, have been very, very good, starting with President Obama. So I'll stop.
There's a couple of questions over here.
I'm sorry, just on your third question about the progress that the Burma-Myanmar government is making by rescuing people. The kind of analogy is when you escaped from prison, are you rescued by the people who bring you back to the prison? It doesn't really make sense. I don't know how that would feel to be on a boat and to be brought back to the place I was fleeing from. So I'm not sure how positive a step it is. And the government have recently said that they've banned people leaving the state. So whereas before they were happy to take money and it was reducing the population, it worked out in their favor. Now they've banned the movement because of the negative press that they're getting from in the recent weeks. So we have a situation where they're more isolated. The prison is getting tighter.
And I think it's worth noting that the UN commended the Myanmar government for intercepting boats and taking them back to Myanmar. What's that about?
I just want to comment on Aung San Suu Kyi's point. As a Rohingya, we Rohingya have been supported for a long time. Like 1990s election, Rohingya parties were in alliance with her. And as an activist, myself, as a leading organization of Burmese Rohingya organization, UK, our organization, we did campaign for her since 2005 until 2010. And while I was visiting in the US, we were talking about to release Aung San Suu Kyi. That is a kind of campaigning issue we did from our organization. And it's very frustrating and very disappointing. As a Rohingya, she's not speaking up. Even, like in the case of injustice, she can't decide at all. It's very more frustrating that she dismissed, ethnic cleansing while she visited to UK last 1.5 years ago, I think. And we repeatedly, requested her to visit to our current state, and she did not visit, and she didn't research anything. Human Rights Watch and other, researchers like, here, International State Crime, they have well researched, well documented, and she just simply dismisses this not happening. It's very frustrating. And the other point, visiting Burma, I also want to, I want to request you to visit to our current state. That would be very good. And you can do something, you can find out what is happening to the Rohingyas. And positive signal rescuing the people, it is just showing up to the international community. Let me bring you one point, like 750 people, they rescued one boat. There is about 120 Rohingyas. And what they, straight away after rescuing that boat, with the mostly Bangladeshi people there, and they say, in our country, you guys go to your home, otherwise we will arrest you or we will throw you from the sea. And some people, they didn't deny and they throw to the sea, high sea. We never know where these people are. And some people they throw to the Rakhine village, and they were carried off. Those people were, just killed by extremists. That's what's happened. And U.S. role, as Kozani have mentioned, is good, but there is no willingness. I should say, it's no time to wait and see for anything. It's immediately they have to come and stop this genocide. That is what we can see. It might be too late, as George mentioned. They can't wait until election, or they can't wait any longer at all. That's what.
So we have about 10 more minutes before we actually have to leave the building or the room. Are there any questions maybe in this? Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I'm visiting Myanmar in September. I haven't done my whole itinerary yet, but in terms of visiting northern Rakhine State, it sounds like it's something that's not really possible if you go there taking pictures of dangers. So you don't recommend going there, and if going there, you should just
you can try, but there's no way. But you can go to Sittwe, and there's 110,000 people in camps around Sittwe, so you can see that, and the ghetto is in downtown.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a question about local Burmese people. I have relatives in Burma who believe rumors. They believe that Rohingya people are also equally violent as Rakhine Buddhists. There are rumors that they go around pillaging and raping and looting as well. And it's very difficult to overcome these rumors, these beliefs, ideologies. Is there any way, just to the whole panel, that we can counter these? With facts or with emotions? How do we counter these? Because I feel that it is ingrained into our ideology. We have been faced with this problem for 40 years, or more. And for the next generation, this is troubling, because we need to move forward. Thank you.
Should we come back on that quickly? Or?
One more.
Okay.
So with the election coming up this year, I just wanted to know whether the kind of anti-Rohingya rhetoric and policies have been discussed much so far, and also how you feel the effects, what are the effects going to be of this election on the Rohingyas? I mean, obviously that's hard to guess, but what do you think, sir? Thank you.
Just very briefly on how do you run a counter narrative to the dominant ideology that permeates Burma. I think it is very difficult, but I think that the Andaman Sea crisis has presented us with an opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity, given that for so long the Rohingya were so deeply under the radar. And I think it's about talking to everybody. I think if you have family members inside Burma, then it's a responsibility, if you like, to present them with information and to challenge. I mean, that's only at an individual level, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important if we can find a strategy, a way to work with activists inside Burma, as well as simply putting on pressure from the outside. I think it is important. And people are surprising. I mean, as criminologists, what we know is that people are far less retributive once they understand, for example, the story behind a young burglar, for example, somebody who has burgled your home. That leads you to feel very angry, upset. You want them to be dealt with by the criminal justice process at one level. But then when you hear the story of a history of abuse, growing up in foster care, in orphanages and so on, we find that people are much less retributive, much more understanding, much more open to a more positive approach to enhancing that individual's life. And this is really important for us to know that people can change, that they aren't absolutely locked into a racist ideology, that they can change. And part of, coming back to your point about wanting to go to Northern Rakhine State, mass tourism would be a very interesting strategy. I have this argument with my Palestinian friends, because everybody I know who goes to Palestine comes back so angry, so incensed, so so with adrenaline running high, because what they have witnessed is state crime, Israeli state crime on a massive scale. If there was an attempt to organise mass tourism to Rakhine State, in fact, so everybody in this room books a holiday, a trip to Rakhine State, and you get all your friends to, I mean, it's fanciful at one level, but at another level it's not, because it's about witnessing. It's about witnessing, seeing for yourselves, then coming back, putting pressure. The kind of emotions that derive from that experience are the kind of emotions that drive us to action. And so that's one aspect.
I mean, the last 3 years, I brought out over 100 Burmese opinion makers, monks, nuns, artists, singers, cartoonists, people who can help influence the way the Burmese public think about, say, anti-Muslim racism, like Islamophobia, and most particularly anti-Rohingya racism. You see, I think there are two distinguishable strains of racism. One is general popular anti-Muslim racism based on fear, the past colonial history. And the other one is what I would call genocidal racism. When you're dealing with genocidal racism, facts don't matter. And if you study immediately post-Holocaust German social history, or like a behavior, until the Germans were forced into concentration camps and forced to witness what the Nazis had done, until that point, there were so many Germans who claimed, I don't know what was going on. Until then, I mean, there are raw footage done by U.S. Army for propaganda purposes of the Germans being, led or actually forced into concentration camps with essentially hundreds and hundreds of dead bodies, and some of them were forced to bury them. And until that point, they refused to believe that the Nazis were doing anything bad. And so we have I'm sad and afraid to say, we have a similar situation. And then you confront these people, relatively more enlightened people with Burmese language documents, all kinds of things. And they still refuse to say, they're unable to say the word Rohingya, let alone take a stand against what is being done to them. So we are so far away. That's why I said, of course I like to say that my society has the last remaining ounce of spiritual strength to stand up against this. I say no. Based on my 3 years working with Burmese from all walks of life, different Christians, Buddhists, even Muslims, some of them distance themselves from the Rohingya persecution. They're Rohingyas, they're illegals. These are Muslims. Forget the Buddhists. That's the scenario. On the elections and the ramifications, I think nothing in terms of electoral mobilization works like mobilizing racism anywhere across Europe. I mean, European societies are far more intellectually developed at the level of mass education. A very high percentage of university graduates, many were at high schools, but we have a situation where university graduates cannot think properly. I'm not exaggerating. They cannot think. Even my 6-year-old daughter can hold a debate with a Burmese university graduate. I'm not kidding. It's nothing to do with the genes. It has everything to do with how she's brought up, like education system. And so I think the politicians know. You see, the Rohingya situation cannot be understood unless you understand the calculated nature of this politics. And there's an ethnic triangle. The Rohingyas are being played against the Rakhines. And now is the last 40 years it has been the Rohingyas' turn. Before that when the Rohingyas were very strong in terms of advocating for their autonomy or even independence, or reclaiming their Rakhine kingdom, they were crushed, and the Rohingyas were co-opted into the state structures. Yeah? And now, when the Burmese state has turned decidedly against the Rohingyas and to a lesser extent Muslims, the Rohingyas are being targeted. And the result of this anti-Muslim and anti-Rohingya ethnic mobilization by the very state that needs to treat everyone equal, the language of human rights is essentially disappearing. That's why when you have people who spend 20 years behind bars, fighting for human rights, coming out and speaking the same language that the generals speak, which is national security, Rohingyas as a national security threat. So 25 years of human rights struggle is completely decimated the minute, the fear of Muslims and the fear of illegal, insect, virus-like Rohingya. So that, the winner really is the military. Aung San Suu Kyi is losing, the society is being destroyed internally because no society that dehumanizes a large-scale community can remain as a human community. So I think the future is really bleak, and the military is going to resort to anything, absolutely anything, to keep itself in power.